Tennessee finally made its first impression of the 2025 season, and it was a good one. From Joey Aguilar to promising transfers to a pressure defense, we're ready to react to the Vols' first win and Alabama's loss and project what it means for the rest of the year. Welcome to the Volunteer State. I'm Tennessee beat writer Adam Sparks, along with John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel. UT beat Syracuse 45-26. We've had some time to reflect on the good and the bad. We also saw Alabama, as I mentioned, lose badly to Florida State. Those two linked together could mean some things later on in the year. We also now know that UT has some critical injuries that could impact its game against Georgia next week. Of course, the Vols play ETSU in the home opener at Neyland this Saturday, 3:30 p.m. kickoff. We're not going to spend much time breaking down that matchup, but we've got plenty to talk about from the Syracuse game. So, John, just give me your. We've had a few days on this now to digest it. What were some of your takeaways? There were so many unknowns going into this season, and now there are some knowns, I would say. What were your primary takeaways from Tennessee's opening win over Syracuse? Let's do that first.
Well, one of the knowns, I thought Tennessee's defense would be solid. I thought its defensive front would again be impactful, and I thought its linebacking play would be better. And based on one game, I think that was true. When I look at a defense now, I don't think so much about yards allowed. I used to probably put more import on defensive stats, yards gained, stuff like that. But if you can pressure the quarterback and make plays, Tennessee did both of those, I thought, against Syracuse. So that was certainly a positive, but it wasn't really a surprise. Offensively, I thought a team full of question marks, a unit rather full of question marks going in. And I think, like everybody else, I was impressed with Joey Aguilar. What I saw on game day in reviewing those thoughts, I haven't watched the replay. I'll do that maybe tomorrow. But Joey Aguilar looks so comfortable. I go back to Joe Milton's first start against Bowling Green. That was in 2021. I think about Nico's first regular season start, not the bowl game the year before, but last year. And I thought Aguilar looked more comfortable in the offense. He just seemed to fit it better. And he had, I thought, made instinctive type plays, when to run, when to pass. He just looked so much more comfortable when you think about it, making his first start, albeit not against an SEC opponent. The guy's played a lot of football. And Joe Milton hadn't played as much as he had, and Nico hadn't played as much as he had. I thought that really showed in that game. So, and I like the way the offensive line had to played so well. I know Syracuse is weak in the defensive front. I understand that, but the fact that it had to juggle its line right before the game with David Sanders, its elite freshman player at offensive tackle, not able to go. I thought it handled itself really well. I thought Sam Pendleton it's hard to notice the offensive line, to single out offensive lineman in a game, but I thought he held his job really well. I thought that was a very good sign.
Yeah, you and I had some similar takeaways, which is interesting because we haven't even discussed these. I'll touch on Aguilar first. I had the same sense, sitting in the press box, after about the first quarter, maybe even halftime, I looked over at a couple of guys that were up there with me, and I said, I wanted to know whether or not Joey Aguilar was good enough to run this offense, just good enough for what they want to do. Good enough to replace Nico. I came away maybe again around halftime asking the question, is he actually better than Nico? I mean, Nico had some issues last year. He was growing into what they wanted him to be, but are they better off with him than Nico? It's not just a replacement. Was it an improvement? And I think, I mean, it's one game in. We'll see. We'll see how Joey does against, Georgia and Alabama and some SEC games coming up. But you're right. He looked more comfortable. I'd be curious to know how much of the offense they installed for this game. I mean, they did a full install in the preseason, but you change up the game plan each game. Um, when I went back and watched the game on replay, and even saw some of the, you can get on YouTube and you can see different feeds, different angles from the field. And I saw the game from a different angle at this game because the press box in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium is not in the middle of the field, which is what I'm used to. In most stadiums, it's in the end zone, so you're seeing the end zone view. I thought looking at all those things, Joey, he seemed to process the offense well. I know we've talked about that a lot with Nico and a little bit with Joe Milton. Like, you've got to process through your reads. You've got to use the middle of the field. You need to use your eyes to drag the safety one way or another, or freeze the safety. Sometimes you need to do that with a linebacker. And he just did that really, really fluidly. A lot of his throws were to his second read. If you remember, Chris Brazel had like a 20-yarder on like 3rd and 10. I think it was on the first drive. That was the second read. That was not his first read. He was supposed to go, I think, to the tight end, the other side of the field. There were a couple throws in the middle of the field where his first read, you could tell, was supposed to be to the outside. That's something that Nico didn't do. Nico would look to the outside. It's not there. And then he would tuck it and then the rush would come. Or he may overthrow the ball. Instead, it looked like Joey was very patient. And I think patience and instincts are two good words to attach to his first start. If you think of two of Joey's touchdown passes, one of them to Star Thomas when he bootlegged to the left, and at some point it looked like you thought he was going to tuck and run. Instead, he just gave it another split second to see if Star Thomas could post up his guy and get open, and he did. On the last touchdown pass to Miles Kitselman, you saw Joey where he had set up to throw the ball to Kitselman. It wasn't going to work there. Either the rush was going to get there quick enough, or Kitselman was not going to break free to get to the back of the end zone. And so you saw Joey just sort of fade back about a half a step to make the throw. Those are things that experienced college quarterbacks do, and usually young quarterbacks don't do. And so I just loved Joey's instincts. I'll give you an overreaction on the offensive line, because that's what we do after one game, right?
Sure.
I think I had said on an earlier pod this summer that I thought there was a chance the offensive line could be better than last season's by the end of the year. I still think that's true. I think it may happen much sooner than that. Again, overreaction. They haven't played an SEC team yet, but there's as much or more talent on this offensive line. And so if they can gel together, I think there's a chance they could be better. I mean, Jesse Perry played great. He was going to be good at guard, but already he was good. He's really good as a fill-in tackle. You mentioned Sam Pendleton. He looked like they didn't miss Cooper Mays. I know they will at some point this year, but it didn't look like that in the first game. Wendell Moy is, if you were giving out an all SEC team after week 1, I think he'd be on the list. And then I haven't even mentioned the 2 5-stars. David Sanders hasn't played yet. Lance Hurd looked healthy and good. This offensive line has a chance to be really good, and I'm beginning to think there's not going to be a drop-off. They may even be better by mid-year on the offensive line. Defense is going to wreak havoc, I think, this year in terms of TFLs and turnovers and sacks. I think they'll have more sacks than the defense last year. I don't think they're going to be a lockdown, stingy defense like last year's was. And if you remember, the defense last year was historically good. It had the lowest points per game allowed since the 98 national title team. I don't think this defense is going to do that, but they may be better in other areas, and that's just sort of those impactful type plays. John, I started with Aguilar, and you did too. On the flip side of that, now Aguilar had a few high throws. He'll get that worked out, but he also had some drops from his wide receivers. I mean, do you think there's an issue there with the wideouts, or did you at least like the first impression you got from those guys?
Maybe I was being too kind, and perhaps it was because we form an opinion before we watch something. You can't help it. You have a whole more than half a year to build up for a season, so you think how you expect it to be. I didn't have high expectations at all for these wide receivers. So, given that, I thought they played better than I expected. There were some drops, um, but I thought they were getting open better. And maybe I'm still going back to the Ohio State game. That's the last game we saw, and as you remember, Tennessee receivers couldn't get open against Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State DBs looked as though they knew the route and were running right there, step for step with them. Uh, so yeah, we kind of thought Braylon Staley, hadn't seen much of him, but we thought he could be good, and he was. I give Aguilar all the credit for hitting him in stride on that deep ball, but I also give him credit for hanging on to it and making, he didn't slow down. He just kept running and made the catch in stride, just like he's supposed to do. Uh, One other thing I was curious about, it's related to the passing game. I want to see what you thought on with Aguilar. The last two quarterbacks, Joe Milton had a strong arm, as you'll see in college football. And if Nico would have been following anybody else, we would have been talking about, well, this guy's got one of the strongest arms I've seen in college football. Joey Aguilar's arm is not that strong, but I wonder if he throws a more catchable ball. Uh, Maybe you couldn't prove it by those drops, but I did, that thought crossed my mind during the game.
Anybody throws a more catchable ball than Joe Milton. I mean, Joe
Good point.
Milton. I mean, his passes hurt people, and I remember receivers saying that it hurt to catch the ball. Um, yeah, I mean, yes, Joey's arm is, as best I can tell, it's like a B minus. It's pretty good. It's not great. It's honestly, it's similar to Hendon's arm. I mean, I don't want to, already the comparisons are coming, to Hendon Hooker. Joey looks like he can run and throw a little bit like Hendon. They're not apples to apples. But if we're just talking about arm strength, Hendon had the third strongest arm of those three, of Hendon, Joe, and Nico, and obviously he was the best of those three. I think
That was
Joe.
a distant three, though, wasn't
Yes,
it?
it was a distant three, and yeah. I mean, Hendon had about a B minus arm, and by the way, you can see that hurting him a little bit in the NFL right now, because he can make most of the NFL throws, but not all of them. I think you could probably say the same for Joey. Um, Sometimes there's something about a guy who's got a B minus arm and not an A or A plus arm, that guy knows where the ball needs to be a little more. He sort of is aware of the few limitations that he has. And so sometimes he just does not try to fit the ball where it needs to be. And so he's a little more decisive about where the ball needs to be. Sometimes those guys work the middle of the field better. Um, Joe Milton could stand on one sideline. If they allowed the ball to be spotted on the sideline, he could throw an out route to the opposite sideline. You know what I mean? So
Not
it's
ma- not many guys can do that.
no,
And
no,
I also, when you say B minus, I mean, if we take C as average, then we would say he has an above average
yes,
college arm. And I think that's a fair assessment. It's not as though he has a weak arm. It's a strong arm. It's just in light of who he's following, it's not as strong. But Adam, isn't it interesting? that Josh Heupel has been drawn to these big arm quarterbacks. He wants to stretch the field with the deep throw, yet the guy with the lesser arm, Aguilar, had no problem stretching the field, as we saw in that pass to Staley. So maybe he can do a better job of stretching the field. And I'm wondering if Josh Heupel is thinking, maybe I don't need as big of an arm guy as I've been getting.
One of the best quarterbacks, at least accuracy-wise, throwing the ball, efficient thrower that Josh Heupel ever had before he came to Tennessee was Dylan Gabriel. And Dylan Gabriel does not have an A-plus arm, I mean, that's a guy that just knew where the ball was supposed to go. And there's something about knowing where the ball is supposed to go a half a second before the guy who can get it there a half a second faster. You know what I mean? So there's a number of ways that you can be efficient in a passing game. And I mean, there were some throws. There was, I think, like an 18-yard out that he hit. I think there was a dig route maybe to Brazel that he hit that was down the field. I mean, Joey made some throws that were in that mid-range, that 15 to 25-yard range, that are fine, that he'll be able to complete with no issues. I don't think he'll be able, as much as Nico and Milton, to be on the right hash and to throw a deep out to the left sideline. And by the way, that's fine, because that means he's going to look to the middle of the field more. And you saw that. I think, obviously, they saw that some things he could do, and I think that made Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley try to scheme to the middle of the field. I thought they almost forced things to the middle of the field, which they should do. I mean, that first throw to Mike Matthews was, I mean, it was to the middle of the field. It was set up great, and that sort of got everybody in the right rhythm. Now, some of the wide receivers are going to have to get a little more accustomed to catching balls there. Brazel dropped one that, if he catches, he could still be running right now. But they'll get the tight ends. Ethan Davis will be more a part of catching balls over the middle of the field. I love the screen game. They threw to the running backs a few times, not just Star Thomas on the touchdown, but they did that little zag route to a screen pass to Deshaun Bishop in the middle of the field. They were pretty creative in the first game, and you'll see, they do these choice routes where they're spread. Josh Heupel's offense has been spread from sideline to sideline. That's what they're known at, these wide splits. But a number of times they bunched it up in the middle of the field. And again, you see them trying to do different things. I think Joey Aguilar is very comfortable sort of sitting in the middle of the field and throwing in that way. And so, and if you're going with two tight ends, which they did, you can do that a little more. I think they'll switch things up game to game. Probably not much this week because it's ETSU. But I mean, I like what I saw so far. My takeaway on Joey Aguilar, again, I had this thought probably by halftime, is that I think he's probably an asset rather than a liability. And that was probably a coin flip for me coming into the season. And what I mean by that, asset rather than liability, I thought at times last year, I don't think that Tennessee won any games last year because Nico was their quarterback. Now, you could say Alabama, he had the throw at the end, but
that was one throw.
Yeah, and he missed some early in the game that would have put them up. I felt like they didn't win any games last year because Nico was their quarterback. You could argue maybe that they lost the Arkansas game because he was their quarterback. I feel like there's a better chance that they win games because Joey Aguilar is their quarterback this year than they lose games because he's their quarterback. Do you agree?
Yeah, and as I talk about him and write about him, I was so impressed how as you were about how he handled everything, but there's always a voice in the back of my head saying, well, let's see what he can do at
one game.
Yeah, and also against a good defense, because go back to last year, after the first 3 games, nobody was saying, "Well, I don't know how comfortable this Nico guy is. Maybe he's not what we thought he." No, Tennessee's averaging about 60 points a game. They're rolling over everybody, and Nico looks just fine. So we'll just know a lot more after the Georgia game.
Yeah, the Nico's start in Charlotte when he went up against NC State, we were saying a lot of some similar things. Yeah, look at his instincts. He's
Uh-huh.
threw the ball in the middle of the field a couple times that
Mhm.
game. Threw a touchdown pass in the middle of the field at Oklahoma, and then it just shut down from there.
Yeah, that
And
was like a one-pass game for him, that game in
that's right.
Norman.
And then it was over. And we should prep people for this one. That I think it was Chattanooga maybe last year that Nico threw for 300 and something yards in the first half. And
And
then
look good doing. I mean,
yeah,
it was like he was showing off. I mean, here's
yeah,
what I can do with the ball. And even in that dreadful showing he had against UCLA, and it got brutally beaten by Utah, you can see arm talent there. You can see glimpses of maybe what Tennessee thought Nico could become, but really hasn't. I just think though with Aguilar, I think when fans watch him, he we talk about him being comfortable. I think Tennessee fans are more comfortable with him
yeah,
than they were the other quarterbacks. And again, we talk about hitting the deep ball, which Milton and Nico, as strong as their arms were, couldn't always connect on that deep throw. I mean, it's not about you're not going to throw it 70. You're not going to have a 75-yard throw in the
mm,
air, maybe 50. Um, so he did that. He had just the right touch. But that play he made on the pass to Star Thomas, where he's running left and kind of having to pull back and throw his, on the run like that, that's not an easy throw for most quarterbacks. And I don't think Nico nor Joe would have made that throw.
yeah. I think Joey threw 3 deep balls in that first game. He hit the one great throw with great arc on it to Braylon Staley for the touchdown. He threw one down the sideline, a deep ball to Mike Matthews. Each of the 3 starters got a deep ball. Mike Matthews, it was a good throw. It was there. It was very catchable, but the defender knocked it away. No problem with that. And then the early one was to Chris Brazel in the middle of the field, which the DB had to he committed a PI, pass interference, um, to make sure that Brazel didn't catch that ball. All 3 were catchable. None were overthrown. You don't want to underthrow any, but again, I just think I think that Joey is probably a good deep ball thrower because his arm is a B minus. He just, he can throw it, 55 yards or whatever accurately, and that's what a deep ball is. It's not 70. And so sometimes just having that limitation, it's a deep limitation, but just to have that limitation that you're not Dan Marino, sometimes that helps you throw with touch, and so I think that's going to help him. Yeah, it's not the Nico pod, but I did watch some of that game, and boy, Nico can be very tempting to coaches pro level, college level, because you saw a couple of throws from him, and you said, okay, yeah, I saw that a little bit at UT, and then he would have the massive overthrow, and you'd think, yep, I've seen that too, and then he would have a run where you said, okay, that's a great run, but that's probably going to be the only one he has in this game. Um, I'll be curious to see if this does not work out for him, if he tries to go in the draft as a late round pick, or if he tries to go back in the portal, or if his camp, wants an all new offense or something from UCLA. Who knows? It's going to be a soap opera to watch. But what Nico was here is what I saw in the UCLA game, just with less talent around him. And I think that was sort of my takeaway from seeing him. And I don't expect that to change much. I mean, he's playing in Vegas Saturday night against Dan Mullen's UNLV squad. So that's going to be interesting to watch. All right, John. Some newsy items here. Ricky Gibson is out for, as what Josh Heupel calls it, an extended period of time. It's of course starting cornerback. The other corner, Jermod McCoy, is still out. They haven't put a timetable on. You know, 3 games. I think Gibson will be out. I mean, he may be out to the bye week. He may be out a month. I think he's probably definitely out for the Georgia game. Jermod McCoy, I don't think he'll be back for the Georgia game. I think he would probably be back sometime around maybe the bye week. They would like him back sometime in the first half of the season. So you're probably going to be without both of those guys against Georgia. Jackson Moy, the defensive tackle, went out. He's out for the ETSU game. I think it's probably a coin flip whether or not he's back for the Georgia game. Nathan Robinson played the game of his life against Syracuse, another D tackle. I don't know if he's going to play ETSU or not. If he does, I think he would maybe be limited because he rolled up his ankle pretty bad. They need him for the Georgia game. I think they're probably going to sit as many guys as they can in this game that have some bumps and bruises, but then some other guys, they're really going to load them up with reps because there's a few D tackles and there's some guys in the secondary that need to get a lot of snaps to try to get ready for the Georgia game. We'll talk about Georgia next week, but I just think it's timely right now because we know Gibson's going to be out. Looks like multiple games. McCoy's out. That means the secondary for ETSU is probably going to be, well, Colton Hood, who was SEC Defensive Player of the Week. Another hit for Tennessee in the transfer portal in the secondary. He goes from being an insurance policy for Jermod McCoy second game. Ty Redmond, the freshman, I think will probably get his first career start. He played 60 snaps in the Syracuse game. I think he thought he was going to play 25 or 30. He got 60 snaps on defense because of Ricky Gibson's injury, and he played really well. I don't know how reliable Pro Football Focus grades are, but they're in the neighborhood of what's true, I think. The top 2 defensive grades for Tennessee were Colton Hood and Ty Redmond, those 2 corners. So good start for them. They'll be playing a lot. The big question with this is, what do they do about their third corner? They need at least 3 against Georgia, so they're going to sort of experiment in this ETSU game with corners. Can you go with Colton Hood, the transfer, and Ty Redmond, the freshman, at corner against Georgia? I think that's who they're going to start against ETSU. I just don't know if you can run a freshman out there against Georgia. But if it's not him, it's probably Jalen McMurray moving from nickel to corner. McMurray is a veteran. He played in the corner rotation last year. He's got a lot of time under his belt. That would be a safer pick, but either way, I think he could be in the mix there. William Wright would be the next guy. If they didn't move McMurray, William Wright is like a fifth-year senior, walk-on, has played a little bit in a lot of games, but he's more of a special teams guy. I bring up the Jalen McMurray part because if you need to bump Jalen McMurray from nickel to corner, your next nickel that would bump up the starting lineup is Boo Carter. So we talked all preseason and last week about, is Boo Carter going to get out of the doghouse? Ricky Gibson's injury may drag Boo Carter out of the doghouse. I mean, John, is that, out of necessity, do you sort of put aside this, Boo Carter's got to serve more time out of the starting lineup because you sort of need him in there? I feel like, practically speaking, if you take all the other stuff out of it, practically speaking, you probably need McMurray at corner as much as you can and Boo Carter at nickel. Boo Carter is a preseason All-SEC guy, and he's a backup. So is that the way to fix it?
I thought in preseason I recommended that Tennessee suspend Boo Carter for the first game.
They did not listen. I'm sorry.
They did not listen. That's not a uncommon reaction for coaches to my column. But by doing
They
that,
they
to
read
me,
they read all of them though. They just sometimes disagree with what you
well,
prescribe.
here's the thing, Adam. I think if you do that, you've meted out a significant punishment. Taking away playing time always gets people's attention, and then you're done with it. Now it's almost like, okay, we're going to play him some, but not all the time. Like, okay, we're working you back in, blah blah blah. I I think now, since they've decided not to suspend him and they're playing him, you should move forward and play him as much as you need to. In other words, the penalty phase needs to end now, I think, for Boo Carter. I don't think that's why I thought if you suspended him for one game, it's a significant punishment, but you get it over with and then you move on. That was kind of my thinking on that. One thing though, Adam, about that Georgia game, Georgia is run oriented. Gunnar Stockton, the new quarterback, I think carried 14 times in a runaway win over Marshall. Uh, Georgia always traditionally under Kirby Smart has had good tight ends. It does again. It doesn't have a Brock Bowers, but we may not see a Brock Bowers for 20 years in college football at tight end. So it's not like he's facing LSU and Garrett Nussmeier, uh, somebody that can really carve up a secondary. Georgia's going to be more run oriented. So, yeah, it's a challenge, certainly playing a team of that caliber. But I don't think the burden will be again on the secondary as it might be against an LSU or later in the season, say against Oklahoma with John Mateer, the Washington State transfer at quarterback.
I think I would. I think I would see if Boo Carter is ready in the ETSU game. If he's good to go, and if he is, I think I would leave the option open to start him at nickel. Maybe not even start him at nickel, but be able to bring him in at any point and play starter level snaps at nickel, so that if you need to, you could put Jalen McMurray at corner. But I'll tell you what, they love Ty Redmond. He played great in the first game. I mean, Syracuse has pretty good receivers. Jonte Cook is a really good receiver. And so, it's not like they played Charleston Southern or whatever in the first game. Ty Redmond as a freshman played really well against some pretty good receivers, some SEC level receivers, I would say. Now they're not as good as Georgia, but it does give you an idea that maybe he's headed in the right direction. So, I mean, that's going to be something we'll need to watch in the ETSU game, but the coaches are going to watch it just as much to see who exactly is ready for that. John, I had mentioned before, sort of, I didn't think the defense. I thought the defense was going to be. I think they're going to be a wreak havoc type defense, but not stingy, like hold opponents under 20. I think part of that is sort of the back and forth between the offense, how complimentary or not complimentary that they are. I looked up this stat this week. Again, we're just talking about one game, so overreaction here, but Tennessee is in the top 5 right now in terms of plays or number of seconds per play. In other words, fastest offense. They're number 5 in the country at the fastest offense. They are, I believe, also number 5 in the country in terms of most defensive plays. Now, if that sounds complicated, basically their offense is really fast and they put a lot of burden on their defense and put them out there a lot. Syracuse had 84 snaps the other day, and that's the most snaps a Tennessee opponent has had since 2022. And I bring all that up because, again, one game, but the formula that I saw in the first game reminded me of a little bit of 21, but certainly of 22, where Tennessee went really fast and they said, hey, defense, it's on you. We're going to score in 2 minutes, and now you got to come out here, and then we're going to score in 2 minutes again, or we're going to punt, and it's going to be on you again, and you just have to stay on the field for, 3/5, 2/3 of the game. And, if that's the way that they're going to be, I think it's probably would be a poor man's version of what the 22 team was, but if your offense is close to what it was in 22 and your defense is probably a little better than it was in 22, you could have a recipe to win at a high level. And so I'm kind of fine if they do that. It's going to put a real burden and a real strain on the defense. And we already saw how that can affect things, because once Tennessee got some injuries on the defensive line and in the secondary against Syracuse, you saw the play start to drift, start to drop off in that second half. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you think they can win like that if they're just scoring really fast and they're just laying it on their defense and say, "Hey guys, just get a couple stops"?
Yeah, because I think their defense is better than Josh Heupel's first two defenses here.
Yeah.
Um, See, I like, and again, we keep saying this, it's just one game, but I think Tennessee's pretty good at linebacker. So the whole defensive front now to me looks formidable. And I watched a lot of football Saturday, and there are not many SEC defensive fronts I would take over Tennessee's right now. So if those guys can put pressure and make plays, and the secondary can come up with takeaways like Colton Hood did in that game against Syracuse, that's a great formula for success. And another thing, Syracuse, where I think it's probably going to be mediocre at best, maybe 7-5 type team is
6 or
probably
6 maybe. Yeah.
best. 7-5 might be high ceiling for this team. Its defense is really lacking. I
Yeah.
think it's going to have trouble stopping anybody. Maybe it can. I don't know if it plays North Carolina, but I'm thinking of an ACC opponent it might can stop, maybe North Carolina. So I just think its offense, though, is pretty effective. I thought Steve Angeli, quarterback making his first start, handled things pretty well given the pressure he was under. He gets rid of the ball quickly. He's accurate. You mentioned Jonte Cook is a good receiver. He's a really good receiver. And I like their running back too. So in terms of the offense Tennessee was facing, maybe it's a subpar team compared to its SEC competition, but it wasn't a subpar offense, I didn't think.
So, John, we made our picks at the beginning of the season. I had 9-3. I think you also had Tennessee going 9-3.
Mm-hmm.
I think we both wondered where those losses would come from. The obvious answer would be Georgia, Alabama, Florida. I said even last week that I could see them winning one of those three, but then dropping another game that you'd expect them to win because that happens every year. But still, that gets you to 9-3. I felt like coming into the season that this was an 8-4 type team, but with a 9-3 type schedule, and so that's why I picked them 9-3. John, after week one, is your pick still the same, or how do you feel about that 9-3 pick? And I say there's two sides of this. There's what you saw with Tennessee against Syracuse, but there's also what you saw in the other teams on Tennessee schedule. And obviously, I'm circling Alabama in that. How do you feel about 9-3 right now with Tennessee? Better, worse, or about the same?
Well, we concurred on preseason stuff. I mean, I thought Tennessee would be a 9-3 team, and the reason I thought it would be that successful was its schedule. It's the easiest, I think, in the SEC. However, after what I watched this weekend, I think Tennessee now it looks like a 10-2 team. We don't know how injuries will play out or things of that nature. Alabama, it wasn't so much that Alabama lost one game, it was the way it lost. Alabama, Lindy's preseason football magazine ranked Alabama's offensive line as the best in the country.
Oof.
It got absolutely manhandled by Florida State. And Florida State, last year was an aberration for Florida State going 2-10. but I don't know that Florida State is as good as it looked against Alabama. But I really wonder about Alabama. I mean, to me, that even in Tuscaloosa, if those teams were playing this week, I'd pick Tennessee. I just think Tennessee's defensive front is deeper than Florida State's. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe Florida State's defensive front is really good, but I only saw it that one time, and I don't know about how much help it got from the transfer portal. It lost its best pass rusher to LSU in the portal, but it looks so good against Alabama. And I wondered about Alabama's playmakers going in. Ryan Williams, terrific wide receiver, who really hasn't done that much since the first half of last season, who looked like a superstar then, but he's not getting enough help, it doesn't look like, from the receiving corps. And I don't know how good Ty Simpson is, but I know he can't survive behind that offensive line. Alabama would be better off with Jalen Milroe the way that offensive line looked to me, because he could make a play on his own and create something out of nothing. I just think right now, if those teams line up, I'd pick Tennessee.
John, will Alabama still have those issues by the time they face off in October? That's my only hesitation, because they do have talent. Now, that offensive line that Lindy's picked number one in the country, they picked them because there are guys on that offensive line that have played well in the past, and there's 5 stars beside a lot of their names. I mean, is this maybe this isn't fixed in a week, but will this not be fixed by October?
Well, it may be. However, you've got a whole off season to get ready for that opener. And as you had mentioned, this wasn't a revamped offensive line. It's an experienced and supposedly talented offensive line. So that raises another question with me: was how motivated was Alabama? That I'm like, what did you think this would be? Did you really think in Tallahassee you were going to be facing a 2-10 Florida State team? No way. And that's
Yeah,
how it looked when it went out there. Like, oh yeah, we'll show up and win this game. I just didn't get a sense of urgency. Alabama, to me, and Kalen DeBoer look like on the sidelines, look like, whoa. It's like they showed up in Tallahassee expecting to see one team and got another one.
yeah, it's fun to sort of monitor the freak out that's going on in Tuscaloosa, and
Sure.
all the conspiracy theories. If you just look on Twitter, which obviously is 100% correct on everything. Um, I think the one I saw today was that Ryan Williams had deleted his Twitch account, which neither you nor I need to know what that even means. Um, but eh, but just a signal that he's tuning out, or probably means absolutely nothing. But people that are monitoring all these accounts and social media accounts and things, um, there was a story that was running around on Twitter, actually, I even saw it on Feinbaum, that there were fans that were staying at the team hotel that said players were late for the bus, that they were calling DoorDash orders in at 2 a.m. past curfew, and letting girlfriends, slide into the room, and all these things that, of course, Nick Saban would never, ever allow. Um, and, just these, probably 10% of these stories are true, but you can see sort of the buzzards going around that program and trying to find somebody to blame. And obviously, DeBoer is the guy that a lot of people are blaming. But if you look on the real stuff on the field, yes, Alabama got bulldozed up front on both sides of the ball. But also, yes, some of their veteran defensive players there's video out there of them loafing in that game. I wonder about the leadership of that team. And with a new quarterback, Ty Simpson, I know is very liked on that team, but he hadn't played before. And so you could see things sort of go sideways. Alabama's got some games that I think they thought were very winnable, easily winnable, that are maybe not as winnable anymore. And I'm not just talking about the Tennessee game. It was interesting, though, to see the polls that came out. Tennessee moved up to, I think, 17 in the coaches poll. They moved up to, I think, 22 in the AP poll. At 21, one spot ahead of Tennessee is Alabama. And so they're still getting sort of the benefit of the doubt there. They were the only team, only ranked team with a loss that lost to an unranked team. All the other teams that are still ranked that are 0-1 lost to a top 10 team and on the road. Alabama lost to then an unranked team on the road, but they're still clinging to the top 25, and they're a spot ahead of Tennessee in the AP poll. But there's a long time till October when that can be decided between Tennessee and Alabama. John, the ETSU game, I want to see the offense run efficiently as it did. I want to see it go fast. I want to see them sort of get a plan together for their cornerbacks, and I want to see the wide receivers make some plays downfield, more plays downfield. I think they're gonna, they try to deep ball with all three guys. I think they probably try that again. They want to get Mike Matthews really rolling. Brazel's been there before. He's caught some balls. But they need Mike Matthews to really get rolling and have a big game and have a couple of big catches down the field and be confident going into the Georgia game. And obviously, we don't watch offensive tackles that much, but I want to see what David Sanders has, because he's the right tackle. He missed the first game for a minor injury. He'll be back now. They do have a plan B if that ever went awry, but they need David Sanders to get a lot of snaps at right tackle and them to have the offensive line set. John, is there any one thing that you really want to see in the ETSU game?
Yeah, I want to see Jake Merklinger. Well, I just think you need to have a backup quarterback ready. And this is a game to play him. I could see the counterpoint to that Aguilar needs. He's new in this offense, even though he did well. He's new. You want him to get as many reps. You want him to develop rapport with his receivers more. So you want to get him as many reps as possible for Georgia. But man, I wouldn't want to risk an injury either. I would just want to get him out of there at halftime and see what Jake Merklinger can do. I wouldn't want to. I just don't want to see Aguilar in the second half of that game.
Here's why Joey Aguilar will not leave at halftime, and that's because last week in the first game, Tennessee was not good coming out in the third quarter. They had a subpar third quarter, and these coaches are all the same. They want to rep whatever, they want to fix whatever's broke, and they will want to see if they can come out in the third quarter and put together a really good drive coming out of halftime. And if they score on that one, then let's just get one more, just one more drive, and then before you know it, it's 10 minutes left in the game, and oh wait, Jake Merklinger needs to get in there and hand the ball off a few times.
That's a great point, because I was watching the LSU Clemson game, and one of LSU's problems last year, although it had a pretty potent offense, most of its problems were on defense, was red zone. So what do they do in the first half? Time's running out in the first half against Clemson, a crucial game for both teams. They're inside the 10-yard line. It's 4th and 2, 15 seconds to go. Just kick the field goal. But no, it's as though Brian Kelly's thinking back to last year when they didn't finish drives in the end zone. We need to show that we're better in the red zone. Let's go for it. And so it ended up pointless.
Got to prove something. There's all those doubters out there. You gotta prove those doubters wrong. So Tennessee should glide. You would think glide through this game pretty well. Yeah, I agree with you. I want to see both quarterbacks, and for no other reason than Joey Aguilar lowered his shoulder 3 times the other night on runs, and had to go in the injury tent. Jake Merklinger was warming up. George McIntyre even grabbed the ball. He was warming up. Had that gone another 2 or 3 minutes, we would have seen seen one of those guys out there. I would assume Merklinger. But yeah, they need he needs some tape. They need him to get reps, and they need to keep Joey Aguilar healthy. So we'll see if that happens. Tennessee's going to kick off against ETSU home opener, Neyland Stadium, Saturday, 3:30 Eastern. It's going to be on ESPN Plus and SEC Network Plus. Please do not email me and ask me what channel that is on, because it's streaming. If you don't have that channel, so to speak, you better get it before then. Follow our coverage of the Vols at KnoxNews.com. We'll have full coverage leading up to the game, obviously, and during the game, and of course after the game. And to share this podcast with your fellow UT fans, we'd love for you to subscribe as well to make sure you never miss us. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Volunteer State.